Well, hello, my name is SherriAnneDuffy-King, and I'm the writer of the title of The Crucified Innocence. I began this book about 15 years ago, when I was around 15, 16 years old. I'm going to be reading from chapter 24 onward. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Chapter 24, The Hunt. Waking up was irritating to Aiden. He was both cold and warm as he opened his eyes, expecting the unexpected. White surrounded him. He began to wiggle around to shake off the pile of powdered snow that had begun to harden into rock. Standing was a bit of a daze as he recalled the prior events of the evening before, looking a bit on the shaky side of camp Evie had built for them, the tent scorched and in a pile of crispy ashes engulfed in wreckage of snow. His horse Ithaca was nowhere to be seen. He turned to Skull Waterfall and began to climb it. Both of Imbala's sons were up and doing a great job at melting the snow quickly. At the top he stood looking over his surroundings. Trees shook the snow from their branches, literally flickering them. Before his eyes the snow had melted any traces of them being there, rushing the little puddles that seeped from the grass and gravel into the exotic river. It was utterly amazing. The wind, warm and friendly, brushed past Aiden's sullen face, pulling out the bag Ollivander had given him. It looked like the color of ruby blood contaminated with dirt. Grasping a bunch of the white and silver dust in his right hand, he threw it up into the air and expertly yanked out his sword and slashed a pattern into the floating dust. Left, right, up, down, tossing it up into the air and expertly yanking his sword back into the fold of his diced substance, stashing his sword back and into the fold of his hilt to watch the dust do its magic. Chapter 25, Journey to Desirable Emptiness. The dust stretched and contorted itself at unbearable lengths. The mirror image stretched out like silver silky bedsheet, reflecting small shards flickering through the imminent space, dozens upon dozens floating like empty square bubbles. One flickered through the rest, cutting into each of them, leaving bite marks, spinning fast, setting off splintering waves, rippling off of the edge, stretching to fit the cylindric mirror. The image was unfocused, slowly defragmenting toward clarity. Evie lay curled up in the fetal position, her skin blue as ice and cold to the touch, her breathing a little irregular, her hair red and auburn, leaves on fire and disconcerted. Webs of tangling strands lay comfortably over her tender soft face, covering bits of it. A moan left her lips, but soon diminished into desirable emptiness. The image pulled out and focused on her surroundings. In a box, zooming further out, a cage wrapped in animal skins on the back of a creaky redwood-built wagon. Wait, that wagon looks like the carriage that almost ran her over. On the road, they were headed toward the dark castle of Sire Shonizar, Sire Aeolus. Sire Aeolus left his lips briefly while stepping off the tip of the skull like walking on an invisible force, falling in a slow swish motion, robe flailing against the savage wind. He landed on his left knee, hugging the ground, and his right in the position for proposal, his left palm eating into the soft gravel as his head was bent. He whistled. Ithaca came rushing to her master's side, prancing to a slowing pace behind him, still on the ground waiting for the opportune moment to fling into the back flip in a mix of a horizontal and vertical side flip onto the back of Ithaca's saddle, resting comfortably on her for a moment longer, nudging her into a sprinting dash, headed into a thicker, colder brush of the dark forest. Chills rippled off of Ithaca's black-coated skin, leaving icy cold sweat pouring into empty, still air. Chapter 26, Devious Conversations. The castle and its walls up ahead were burnt black, the color to show, as one would think, that the empire inside wasn't as friendly. Heaps of billowing, thunderous clouds covered the sky. Surrounding the castle were a darkening shadow. The bridge up ahead was an old, crackling mess that woodworms feasted upon all the time. Trotting gallantly up to the entrance, caution vibed around Aiden's frazzled nerves. Darkness approached like a cotton blanket covering all of Imbala. The torches on each side of the drawbridge gate were lit and gleaming, leaving a hazy, warm glow stretching around the entrance, lighting the way to the inside. Sliding off of Ithaca with great gentility. "Who goes there?" A soldier stepped out of the curtain of trees, his heels eating into the gravel. This man was entirely covered in dark auburn coat of fur from head to toe. From his waist down he was in Sire Iolus' guard uniform. Holding a torch, stepping closer to Aiden, he asks again, "Who goes there?" Voice humming a vivacious growl. Aiden knew there weren't going to be any more chances for this guard to ask again. "Raylos, you old dog, 'tis Aiden McTavish." Aiden stepped forward, reaching his right hand out to accept Raylos' grasp in a friendly manner. "Raylos, I have taken some time to visit my deathly ill family." "I'm sorry to hear about that. My best regards. I hope your family recovers from the travesty." Granted, I'm pleased that you are a great soldier and friend that I'm able to command in any situation."
Maybe.
Excuse him. He's watching YouTube.
I don't know.
"Thank you, General. Have you heard the grand news?" "What news, Raylos?" Aiden smiled, riveted at straight seriousness. "The foretold girl from the book has arrived. Saw her myself, I did. Peeked through the cage out about an hour ago. She lives up to the page's description. A beauty she is. Sire Iolus will be proud, thanks to that Padua. They tracked her down and brought her here." "Wow! That is great news." "Yes, it is, General. King Iolus is holding a wedding tonight. Gonna be a great honeymoon, I hear. Their being entwined by marriage is gonna change the course of Imbala's historical events to come." "Raylos, I'm glad to see you and hear such fantastic news, but I am beginning to get weary from the long and exhausting journey, so I'm going to take Ithaca to shelter and make sure that there is food and water for her to nibble and drink on. Then I'm going to go wash up and change to meet King Iolus. It was nice to see you again, Raylos. Great job on securing the perimeter." Raylos' fur sucked into his body to show off a lean, tan, muscular form, his hair auburn stretching down his spine. Hand in hand, grasping each other's forearms, they both pulled in for a friendly hug. A deafening web of lightning crackled through the sky above them. Footsteps padded across the stone. Water splashed underneath the death echo of the bolt. A subsided struggle that ended quickly in jingling keys in a lock. Focusing back on Raylos, Aiden began to say, "Whew. I have to take Ithaca to the stables and head to my chambers for a quick change. Mind if I go? Although our chat was quite extraordinary, I'm weary and am in need of a quick rest before I present myself to our beloved Sire Iolus." "'Tis not a problem, dear comrade. I will see you at the dinner celebration after the wedding." With that, Raylos shook the rain off like the wet wild animal, and fur sprouted, covering his skin instantly. Turning toward Ithaca, Aiden grasped her reins tightly and guided her across the bridge. At the other end, he turned to Raylos and waved. Raylos yelled out, "Get feeling better. I think exhaustion is making you repeat yourself." Aiden watched as Raylos turned with his torch of light behind the curtain of forest in the misty rain. Fog looped the outer area of the forest. Going through the arched gate, Aiden whispered a coded command to Ithaca. Ithaca turned and headed for food, water, and shelter. After watching her leave, Aiden turned to a brick in the wall surface. Pulling out his bag of dust, he tossed a handful of the sparkling substance onto the wall, watching it shatter on the bricks. pushing the rough surface deeper inside the wall, unclenching and releasing a passageway. Chapter 27. Flames of Passionate Jealousy. Aiden tried to prepare himself for what he might see and the emotions he was bound to feel. Sneaking through the tunnels was easy. Down there all he had to sneak past were sewer rats, and they weren't always a huge concern. But she was. Sliding up the ladder like a slithering serpent to enter through the security hatch to the most used room in the castle, the kitchen. That was the tricky part, okay? Hustle and bustle was all he could hear from loud and obnoxious servants and cooks as they frantically rushed to pull off the inevitable. Good thing a large cabinet in a barrel of liquor blocked anyone's view, giving enough cover for him to move fast and silently. The kitchen was always a rough obstacle. Crouching low against the barrels, pulling out a small, round shaving mirror to strategize a plan to leave the kitchen, doing the crab walk, he crept close to the edge and looked out. No way out. The crab walk was not the most easiest skill to acquire, but Aiden pulled it off. To his right stood an open archway. All he had to do was get there undetected. The area he was held up in was lit by a candle on the table above the secret door. It danced to the current of air. Right then and there, Aiden knew what he needed to do. Handful of dust, silvery dust, blew a gust of his magic toward the lonesome candle flame, extinguishing its warmth in serenity. Pitch darkness filled all the dimensional crevices in the small space, giving a welcoming cover to Aiden as he did a side roll across the stone floor and out of the kitchen. Thinking he was safe was an understatement as he stood and was nearly trampled by an aggravated servant carrying a huge white wedding cake. Luckily, he moved fast enough to get a cynically angry glare from the servant. Now out of the hazardous zone, he brushed the dirt off of him and looked around for her. Finding her with his eyes, he realized he needed better cover. A pillar a couple of feet from the Tenarian throne of black, shimmering steel. He waited patiently and watched in complete silence, only inches from being recognized by the king. Heart beating only for her, seeing Evie sent rippled, unnerving passion splintering through his veins, watching her blindfold slowly fall to the floor. Eyes blinded by the suns pressing through the glass-arched windows, Aiden never knew a woman could have such an effect on him. Evie was shoved forward through the doorframe into the great hall, arms bound as she glided slowly down the row, shoulders slumped as if she were walking down death row. Her eyes, wild but tame and harmless, full of confusion. Seeing her treated in a barbaric way inflamed rage in Aiden's eyes and twisted anger in his heart toward those damned vile P.O.V. Not realizing, his hand slid down the pillar edges to his dagger and Thracian rapier. She was barefoot, her dress ripped and filthy, clinging to her warm, moist skin, barely hanging on to her body. One could barely distinguish most of her bruises from blotches of dirt. Evie's hair was tangled and passionately wild, as if she were an avenging war angel. When the light of Imbala's suns kissed her hair and form, crimson flames erupted, making her a most prized angelic spectacle, only further proving the myths were accurate. As she reached Iola's, Aiden felt a gust of wind move past him. It was Sophie, rushing away to do the king's biddings. He didn't pay attention to what the king was saying to her, just the possessive kiss and aggressive toss of her like a piece of cloth. Anger and jealousy flushed through Aiden's veins, showing flames in his eyes. After the P.O.V. carried her off, Aiden followed behind, like a fly on the wall. Stopping across the hallway, Evie was placed in the chamber across from his. He walked to his door as casual as possible, glancing at the two guards, Gary and Larmain. They nodded in unison. "Greetings, General." Then he stepped into his bedchambers and began to get clean and ready for his welcoming back audience with Sire Iolaus. Chapter 28. Jealousy. Jealous shell with no soul. Aiden entered Iola's chambers in full uniform, where he finds his king sitting in full view on the edge of his bed, preparing for his wedding. Always a pleasure to smell fresh and feel clean on a wonderful night like this one. Smiling up at Aiden as he spoke. Yes, it is. I thought you yourself would like to hear that I'm back from my home. Everything is going well. In a stern yet unsurprising tone, Iolaus added, General Aiden McTavish, I would like to personally welcome you back. Pacing a bit, then kneeling in front of Iolaus. Congratulations, my lord, on getting married. Iolaus jumped onto his feet and patted his hands devilishly and greedily together in a gesture of excitement. "'Tis a blessing from the gods." Then turning away from the fireplace toward Aiden. You, General, must go rest until the celebration. Leaving, Aiden felt comforted relief. Walking back to his room, he brought Gary and Larmain goblets of celebratory wine, thanking them as he went into his room, satisfied that no one knew he was up to no good. In his room stood a bed with black, silky sheets, fluffed white cotton, and cocoa-colored wood. His bed glistened him to rest. In his heart he felt it wasn't time for that yet. At the end of the bed stood a wall fireplace with white and black tile in a mantel that was also white. In the right corner stood the mirror that reflected his harsh couple of days, eyes going to emerald, to piercing blue. Aiden lifted both eyebrows as he checked the bags under his eyes. Hair wavy and touching the middle of his neck, not curly, just glistening dark waves, barely softly grazing his arched brows. He enjoyed the new look. Stubbled beard, as one would think, but light and gentle. He imagined kissing Evie, her fingers gliding through his hair and sliding down his cheekbone to caress his silky beard, gliding down and around to where she clasped onto his neck and kissed him deeply. Kissing her would be a blessing and a curse to both their sacred lives. He hoped that she wasn't a dream. He couldn't bear the thought of waking up one morning and her existence was just a fictitious fantasy. If this passion he felt for her were to remain, but she weren't, he didn't think he could handle heartache. Without her, he felt he would cease to nothing more than an empty shell of despair. He yearned her. Unable to bear it any more, he slid on his hooded cape and walked to the left side of the bed where a bookshelf was etched into the wall. A gargoyle statue hung on each side of the bookcase, hunched in a growl position, mouth snarling in a glass ball of liquid flames. Taking both hands and stretching to lightly push the horns into the scalps of the gargoyles, releasing a latch. Both glass balls turned from yellow to blue as the shelf opened up to reveal a set of crude steps. Walking down under the hallway, Gary and Larmain were stationed, but 5 feet across to another set of steps going up to Evie's room. Standing and waiting and watching helplessly was the hardest thing Aiden had to do in his entire life, or so he thought. There she stood in front of the mirror, looking lavish and white. From his position, he couldn't hear any of the conversations in her chambers. She stood there saying something to Sophie, and it had the wrong effect. Next to Sophie stood Iolaus, face shocked and distraught, as he ordered Sophie out and paced the room. Evie's face twisted to an apologetic expression, then she turned back to the mirror, eyes downcast. Then Iolaus was instantly behind her, his fingers and palm wrapped around the nape of her neck as he held her tall, her weight lifting off of the ground, feet barely able to raise the stool. He whispered harshly into her ear like a slithering serpent. Tears began to purge violently and emotionally down her cheeks and dampen part of her bosoms and gown. Sorry about that. My kid was freaking out. I'm going to recap what I just read. That way we can go from there. Alright? Then Iolaus was instantly behind her, his fingers and palm wrapped around the nape of her neck as he held her tall, her weight lifting off of the ground, feet barely able to braze the stool. He whispered harshly into her ear like a slithering serpent. Tears began to purge violently and emotionally down her cheeks and dampen part of her bosoms and gown. Something oddly happened. Iolaus glanced at her face in the mirror, his face twisted to regret as he lets go and sprints out of the room, guards locking the latch behind him. Silently she rubbed away tears that Aiden felt he should have handled for her. Sadness filled the spaces around her, evaporating, and his heart ached for her, heart heaving wearily. She walked over to the sill of the window and held onto the wall for support as she slid down the sturdiest wall she could collapse into tears onto. Her moans of distress were too much for Aiden's heart to handle. Aiden quietly skirted the edge of the bookshelf. In a trance, he knew he wanted to be the one to make all her troubles go away and tell her it was all going to be all right. There he was standing over her, taking her under his arms and holding her waist, pulling her up to him, her eyes downcast, slowly rising up Aiden's body. Then her green eyes glittered as their eyes met, making his heart slow to skip a beat. A smile crept up her lips. She gave Aiden courage to fight the fire. Resting his palms on her rosy cheeks, he gently wiped away her fears. He wrapped his hand into hers, their fingers intertwined, guiding her toward the bookcase in the wall. Sounds of feet shuffling outside. Aiden brought her around and pressed her against it, arms held above her head, kissing her in a gentle yet passionate way. Deja vu was all Aiden could think. Sounds that hearts made were like horses thundering in a pack. Aiden felt like he was part of her. He belonged with and to her. More clutter outside the room. Time to go. Aiden opened the bookcase and down they went. Light slowly drowning in darkness as the wall slid back into place behind them. Later outside, Aiden placed her on Ithaca. While she was drowsy, Aiden pulled out his stiff, an elemental charm that placed all objects in silent pause. Aiden grabbed onto Ithaca and Evie, then spun it. A huge pulse riveted through them, making all time stop. Then Aiden slid in front of Evie and led the way to the citadel of Ollivander. After riding back to the cottage covered in weeds, something seemed a tad bit odd. Aiden felt like someone or something was following them. On top of the citadel, a crow sat, feathers black and shimmering, but the crow itself wasn't odd. What did make Aiden nauseous was that a tiny fly sat on the crow's back, as if it were riding it like a horse. Chapter 29, Honorable Disheveled Secrets. Aiden steps out from the cabin room and takes a bag of coins and drops them into Gabriella's soft, milky white fingers, whispering in her ear, "Take care to conceal her identity and safety. When she is ready, tell her the truth." Noticing this time the fly sat on the wall as if spying. But it couldn't be. That's not even possible. Brushing it off is nothing but paranoia. He left out of this concealed cabin, or as Ollivander loved to call it, the secret citadel. All it was a fortress underground hidden as a cabin with jungle fever. Rushing as fast as the wind would let him go, Ithaca's hoofs eating into the earth, passing over the little bridge and into the archway. Hopping off of her, Ithaca knew where the stables were and took herself. Crossing into the labyrinth, all he encountered down below was a blur, entering up the stairs into his bedchambers, making sure the gargoyles on his wall's glass turned back to yellow flames. He almost forgot about his stiff activation. But first he washed the dirt and filth off of him and rechanged. Finally ready, he twitched the stiff, and another vibrant shock rippled all around, making everyone come to life. With everything, he left for the great celebration, telling Gary and Larmaine that he would see them at the ceremony. They smiled and continued chatting about ancient long ago wars. Chapter 30. Taken by Surprise. Iolus returned to his room to finish getting fitted. All in black, no shirt, and a jacketed robe gliding across the floor as he stood. Black balloon-shaped drawers, metallic saber and rapier slid between the folds of his cloth and the tight tan sides. Enter, Sophie. Time slows to a pause. Two large snakes slither off of the bedpost, wiggling as they take human form, both in loin's cloth, one with hawk eyes and a long, black, shiny, blue-tinted hair hanging down his spine, the other with black eyes, with sparks of red shooting out of the center. His hair was short, at least a shoulder length, his hair black with sparks of red shooting from the roots to the tips. Both have skin soft and dark as worked leather. Lyco, something strange has happened, the younger one with the red streak says. Delvoyer, someone has frozen time so they may escape unnoticed. Lyco shifts and morphs into a glistening crow while Delvoyer, hop on so we might investigate. Delvoyer glides through the room and lands on Lyco's back. They take flight. Below the window they see a man and woman on horseback putting distance between the dark castle and them. The man was hard to see, as his hood covered his identity, Delvoyer says. Lycos, they are headed to the Death Forest where Ollivander's citadel is. A moment's pause. Fly fast past them so we can blend into the scenery. They sat there, as uncanny as possible. After they went in, Lycos and Delvoyer tried to get in. The fly was easy to get in, but the crow went around back to sit and wait on top of the tower. Lycos and Delvoyer. If he comes out, follow him. I'm sure he's from the king's staff. Go now. If he does return, be back in the room to report to master. If they leave, I'll communicate through telepathy. Delvoyer did what he said, then hightailed it back to his master's chambers. He turned back into a snake and waited. Time slithers into play. Iolus sent a guard to tell Gary and Larmain to bring Evie. Soon after leaving, the guard returned with two soldiers. Both men's faces were as pale as sheets and confused, the looks children give when they spill milk. Uh-oh. She's gone, sire. So outraged, he turns to Sophie and lifts her off the ground about a foot. You fool, how could you let her escape? Fingers tightening around her neck. He clamps down and snaps her neck, tossing her to the ground, where her body slides into the shadows of the corner. Aieek! Excitement fills the space. He didn't care if it were her fault, only that her misfortune lay in being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He only cared that someone pays. High-pitched giggles and snorkels came from the corner she lay in. Good thing she were dead, or it would truly hurt. In the shadows lay dozens of his pet munchkins, chowing down on her flesh and organs under her clothes. Only seconds later the munchkins gave an echoing burp that shook the room. Then with teamwork, they tossed her body back into the light, clothing, bones, and hair intact. His pets were picky eaters. Their cries are a horrid mixture of hissing gurgles with asthmatic wheezing sounds, their eyes completely in darkness, bodies white with a clearless texture. Tongue and body were a mixture of snake and spiders. The webbing came from the nape of their neck in a design on their headband, teeth rugged and full of venomous, numbing poisons. After passing the edge of his bed for a short while, he turned to Gary and Larmain and said, You two go search for her. Taking the messenger guard with them, the room fell silent. Delvoyer slithered back to the floor, then shifted to his human shape. Master, time was stopped. We followed her and a hooded figure, riding to Ollivander's citadel. Another moment's pause.
No.
I believe she is still there. Iolus sat in silence for a long minute thinking of her. "Oh, I see." Then set his face in his palms and waited for more. Lycos was watching and waiting. Something gave Delaware a look of certainty from within. "Master, Lycos said that she is boarding the Ecuadorian Siren, and to come quick and claim what is yours." Delaware, turn yourself into a huge creature with magnanimous wings, so we might take flight. While Delaware was changing shape, Iolus was writing a note for Aiden, stating all that has happened, except leaving out where he was going. "General Aiden McTavish, urgent. I have left to travel for a while in my forest. I'm sad to say I will not be getting married. I need time to heal from my broken heart. Took my 2 Padawa. Take care of my dozens or so munchkins and the castle duties till I return. Sire of Shonizar, King Iolus." That seemed good enough. Someone who was leaking info to betray him. This note would keep suspicion from arising. Delaware was ready, and Iolus now looked ready to fight and claim what he thought was his. And with that, and out the window they went. A couple of miles out, they decided to stop for sanctuary in time to regroup. Lycos joined them. "Sire, take this tablet. It will help you claim what is yours without so much as a fight." Iolus grinned harshly and pocketed the pill. Now in a private disguise, he watched and waited while peeling potatoes, waiting for her. The door opened to the cabin. Long, slender boots, tight pants, rapier and dagger belt to her waist by a harness, white fluffy blouse and black vest, allowing all to see her tanning cleavage, dark auburn curls wrapped in a lavender ribbon behind her neck. Suns lightening up her silhouette, she stepped out onto deck and her eyes lit up. Iolus watched Evie secretly all day, waiting for night to fall and for her to be alone.